Genesis, chapter 33. If you have the church app, in the Coram Deo section of the app, you have today's slides. So please pull those up if you'd like to follow along and trek along with us. They'll have the scriptures, the roadmap for where we are today. Genesis chapter 33. Guys, I'm a fan of the Avatar movie franchise. I've even turned Bear into a fan of the Avatar franchise. We've watched the first two movies, and I can't wait for the third movie that comes out, I think, later on this year. I think that one is called Fire and Ash, I believe, but can't wait to do that. It's a classic story of the foe that becomes friend, that becomes family. And it's great because humans travel to this distant moon called Pandora because the earth is losing its energy, and so they found an energy source on Pandora that they can use to take back to earth to preserve earth. But the humans have to figure out how to move these humanoids, these Navi, off of their land so that the humans can mine their planet to take back this important element back to earth to preserve earth before it goes up in smoke. And so the humans have to transform into these like 9-foot tall humanoids in order to engage them, to learn their world, learn their language, earn their trust, and coerce them from the inside to move off of their sacred land so that the humans can move in and do that, and all hell breaks loose because as the humans become Navi, they begin to understand them and appreciate them and befriend them, which makes them traitors of humans on earth. And so, great story of these humans who are their enemies. And some of them become their friends. And eventually, Jake Scully, the star of the movie, actually becomes family and decides to permanently become one of them. And it's just a great story. James Cameron is brilliant. Stacy's not a fan because when the first movie came out in 2009, Stacy was uber pregnant with Dana, and we were standing in a long line to watch the movie, and Stacy was very pregnant and not happy, and this movie was a blockbuster, and so the lines were long to see it, and so she never became a fan because she's got a bad memory of standing in line 8 months pregnant waiting to see this movie. So and plus it's 3 hours long, so that didn't help either. But so while Stacy's not a fan, I've been able to get Bear loves Avatar. And so in our story today, this is exactly what happens. You have the humans and the Navi, some of them reconciled in the movie Avatar. And in today's story, you have Esau and Jacob, who have been enemies and sibling rivalries their whole life, but enemies over these last 20 years, who are reconciled to one another. Genesis 33 is one of the most beautiful chapters in all of the Bible. Because remember, the story of reconciliation, which is why we named our church Reconcile Church Los Angeles, and why we have Reconcile Church Monterrey or Mexico, and why we have Reconcile Church Argentina, because God is doing one thing and one thing in the earth, and that's reconciling the world to himself. And so we've got the coolest name on the planet because this is apostolic theology. This is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take people who are far from God and make them one with him again. Reconciliation simply means to make one again. We were one with God in the Garden of Eden before our prodigal primordial parents sinned in the garden and alienated humanity from divinity. And God has been on a mission from Genesis 3 to the present to reconcile us, to make us one with him again. And here in this chapter, we see the beginning, the genesis, no pun intended, of reconciliation. Reconciliation is not an apostolic idea. Jesus didn't come to the world articulating a gospel of reconciliation. It's rooted in Genesis. Jesus and the apostles are continuing God's mission from Genesis. And so our church is rooted in the apostolic, because Paul is the only one who talks about reconciliation in the New Testament. He's the only one who uses that word. So it's a Pauline idea, but it's woven throughout the tapestry and a motif throughout the Bible. And Genesis 33 is really where it gets beautiful. And so I love this story. And so let's look at, there are two major movements in the text. Verses 1 through 11 is the rapture and rhapsody of reconciliation. Verses 1 through 11. This is beautiful. We're going to see this again in Genesis when we get toward the end of the book. But this is the first iteration of it. Verses 1 through 11. Jacob reconciles with his twin brother, who is his arch enemy, in verses 1 through 4. Jacob reconciles with Esau. Look at this story. Jacob has been wrestling all night with the angel. You guys remember WrestleMania last week? After he's been wrestling all night and all morning with this angel, the angel finally goes back to heaven. And Jacob looks up after he's exhausted, after he's wounded, his hip has been dislocated, and he's trying to gather himself. And what's the first thing that happens? Jacob looks up and he sees Esau coming with 400 men. Now he didn't get time to shower or catch a breath. Look at verse 1. It says, "Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming toward him with 400 men." Man, how would you like that? I didn't even get to go in my corner. You know, usually in a match, when the round ends, you get to go to your corner and sit on your stool. He didn't even get time to do that, because here's Esau coming. So he divides his children among Leah and Rachel and the two slave women. And he put the slaves and their children first, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Jacob crosses the Yavak River and assembles and aligns his family in the order of their prominence or their status within the family. So Bilhah and Zilpah, his concubines, and their 4 children are first in line. Then it's Leah and her 7 children. She's got the 6 boys, and she's got Dinah. And then Rachel and Joseph are last. And so he orders them from the least important to the most important. Now, there have been questions about why Jacob structures and orders his family. So is he doing this in case Esau attacks, that his 4 children by the concubines would be killed first? And what is Jacob thinking as he prepares and orders this processional? We're not sure. Again, we got to get to heaven and ask him. But notice in the text that Jacob and his favoritism of Joseph will spark a sibling rivalry that's greater than the current Esau and Jacob rivalry, because notice Joseph is the only son mentioned in the text. He's got 10 other brothers, and they're not mentioned, but Joseph is. Bum, 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 bum. That's a sign Moses has taken us somewhere by that. Look at verse 3 with me, because Jacob, emboldened and encouraged by his angelic altercation on last week, takes the lead in encountering Esau. Verse 3 says, Jacob himself went on ahead and bowed on the ground 7 times until he approached his brother. Jacob's 7-fold prostrations are a conciliatory gesture intended to signal to Esau Jacob's humility as a servant. And so Jacob prostrates himself before his twin brother 7 times, which is a total reversal. Remember, we talked about that because the patriarchal blessing said that Esau would bow down to Jacob. And here in this text, we're flabbergasted and stunned and shocked out of our senses that the patriarch of the family is bowing down to the brother that is despised and has been overlooked by God. And then verse 4 is the most beautiful of this text. It says, Watch this. I was emotional reading this week. It says, but Esau ran to meet him, hugged Jacob and threw his arms around him and kissed him. And they wept. This touched me earlier because, first of all, you guys know I've said this before, that men in the ancient world don't run in public. Their long flowing outer garments don't allow them to run. So in order for a man to run, he's got to pull up his outer garment and show his legs. Men don't show their legs in public in the ancient world, unless they want to be embarrassed and shamed and ridiculed by those that are on watchers, that are eyewitnesses. And so Esau shames himself because he doesn't care about being embarrassed. He doesn't care about social protocols. He hadn't seen his brother in 20 years. And so he runs to meet him and throws his arms around him and kissed him. And then together, these brothers wept. Now, what they said to each other as they're hugging each other, I want to get to heaven and ask Jacob, hey, what did you guys whisper in each other's ears when you hugged Esau? What did you say to him? What did he say to you, man? You got to tell us, because Moses didn't tell us what you guys had to, as you were embracing and you wouldn't let each other go. As your tears were on each other's shoulders and as you were kissing, what did you say to your brother? Don't you wish Moses had told us that? You know, Uncle Laban ran to meet Jacob. He hugged him and kissed him, but there were no tears when they met in Genesis 29:13. To this point in Genesis, this encounter between these brothers is the most soul-stirring example of reconciliation. Why? Because we've been on this journey for a year and a half, haven't we? And we're still mortified by the fratricide of Cain and Abel as Cain kills his little brother Abel. We're still horrified by such a horrible event. And so we've been wondering, Cain killed Abel, would Esau kill Jacob? Right? But we've been conditioned to see brothers attack each other mortally. And so this story turns out differently, and so it hits us differently when we think about Cain and Abel. This was what should have happened in Genesis chapter 4, right? Cain and Abel should have been reconciled to each other, but no, Cain murders his brother in cold blood. The other thing that makes this story of reconciliation so significant for us is that it's been 20 years since this animosity has been brewing, and Esau's plans to kill Jacob after Isaac's death were well known. I mean, this wasn't a secret. Esau was telling people, as soon as my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother. So had the 20 years since Jacob's treachery against Esau, had it calmed or calloused Esau's heart? That was the question we all been waiting for. Has Esau been calmed or calloused by the time, by the 20 years? Let me ask just a rhetorical question. We have a mantra in our culture that says, time heals all wounds. Is that true? I don't know if that's true. Some people go through life and go to their grave wounded and scarred by trauma. What we can tell from this story is that the 20 years, something has calmed and soothed Esau's heart, and we're not sure what it is. There are so many unanswered questions. Moshe, the author of this text, here are some questions I'd love to ask Moshe, or Moses, the author. What changed Esau's heart? Moses doesn't tell us. What led him to forgive Jacob? Moses doesn't tell us. Was Jacob's lavish conciliatory gift the catalyst? Was Esau really coming with those 400 men to kill his brother Jacob? But man, when he saw those 550 gifts coming his way, his heart changed. Was it the gifts? Or was it God? Moses doesn't tell us. Had their parents, Isaac and Rebekah, persuaded Esau to forgive his brother while he was gone? Moses doesn't tell us. Hey, Esau, what's behind the 400-man militia? Moses doesn't tell us. Is Esau flexing his muscles, demonstrating his wealth and strength again? Moses doesn't tell us. I'm sorry, guys. I just have a lot of questions. These are the questions I come to the Bible with, and I'm looking for these answers. And God is not interested in tickling every fancy that we have. And so we just got to take what he gives us and run with it. And so I have to ask, man, I'm going to have books when I get to heaven of questions that I want to ask Moses, that I want to ask Jesus and Paul and Ezekiel and all David. I just have questions. I think I'm going to be the guy in heaven when they see me coming, everybody's going to find something to do, like Daryl's coming. I know what let me find something to do. I think I'm going to be that guy. That's okay. When I see him running from me, I know. I got all of eternity to get my questions answered. So I don't have to worry about missing out on anything. None of us have got anywhere to go but to hang out with each other. So I feel good about that. Jacob's family rendezvous to meet Esau. This is beautiful because as the brothers have now been reconciled, now it's time to meet the family. And that's what happens in verses 5 through 7. After they stop embracing and hugging and snotting up and tearing up on each other, it says in verse 5, when Esau looked up and saw the women and children, he asked, "Who are these with you?" And Jacob answered, the children God has graciously given your servant. Jacob's reply underscores his change in character. He attributes the children to God's grace and not to his reproductive prowess. Don't miss the fact that Jacob refers to himself as Esau's servant. Don't miss that. These are the children of God. God has graciously given your servant that he's given to me. Because Esau, I'm not just your twin brother, but man, I'm your servant. Don't miss that. Esau wants to meet his sister-in-laws and his niece and his nephews. And so we're not only are we having reconciliation, but we're also having a family reunion. And this is beautiful in the text. Jacob is referring to himself as a servant, and he's not only acting in a conciliatory manner. Remember, he prostrates himself 7 times before Esau, but he's also speaking in a conciliatory fashion. So his words and his actions are signaling to Esau that, hey man, I'm here to reconcile and to make things right. In verse 6 and 7, Jacob's family meets Esau in the order of their procession. They too, that Jacob is orchestrated, and they bow before Esau too. Then verse 6 says, then the slaves and their children approached him and bowed down. And then Leah and her children also approached, and they bowed down. And then Joseph and Rachel approached and bowed down. So all 12 of his kids and his 4 wives, the 2 concubines, and then Leah and Rachel in the order of Jacob's affection for them. And so here the family bows down, and Jacob has instructed the family what to do when they meet Esau, that they are supposed to prostrate themselves and show honor and humility and respect to Esau, who's holding all the cards. Now, in verses 8 and 11, Jacob reasons with Esau about the appropriateness of the reparations or restitution, because Esau is asking questions. Hey, who are these folks with you? Introduce me to my family. I haven't seen these folks before. You had them while we've been away, so introduce you. So now that the family reunion is happening, now Esau switches gears and says, hey man, you know, what about this processional? What about these servants that met me on the way? What is all of this about? And so look at verse 8. Esau says, what do you mean by this whole procession that I met to? What's up with all of these gifts? Man, it was 550 animals that your servant said are a gift from you. What is this all about? And so he asked for an explanation from his brother. And look at what Jacob says. What's the language here? Because we got to go into the Hebrew text, because what's in the English doesn't do justice to what's actually in the Hebrew text. Notice that Jacob says in verse 8 that these gifts, this procession of gifts, is to find favor with you, my Lord, Jacob says. Now, not only does Jacob refer to himself as a servant, but he refers to his brother as his Lord, as his master, as his sovereign. That's what these gifts are about. They are to find favor with you. Favor here in the text is this whole idea of grace and goodwill. Jacob is saying, man, these gifts were intended to earn your favor, your grace, your goodwill. Again, the conciliatory language, he says that you're my Lord, you're my older brother, and I'm submitting myself to your authority. And so Jacob insists that Esau partake of these of the gift and that he enjoy them. But look at verse 9. Esau pushes back against Jacob's generosity in verse 9. Look at what Esau says. He says, I have enough, my brother. Esau replied, keep what you have. Esau says, hey, brother, I'm filthy rich just like you. I got enough. You see these 400 men with me? I got more people and more possessions back at home. I'm good. Keep what you got. I have enough. Pay attention also that Jacob has referred to himself as Esau's servant. He refers to Esau as Lord. But what does Esau call Jacob? Brother. Don't miss the details. Esau refuses this generous gift on the grounds that he's got all he needs. In spite of Esau forfeiting his birthright and being defrauded out of the patriarchal blessing, God has enriched Esau lavishly. And Esau's like, man, I don't need your stuff. I want a relationship with you. I don't need what you have. Esau adds to his own conciliatory language by referring to Jacob as brother. Why can't Jacob reciprocate the brother language? Don't you want to know that? I love this because Victor Hamilton, one of the commentators and scholars that I read preparing for these messages, had this beautiful statement where Hamilton says, Esau desires a fraternal relationship, but Jacob is unable to move beyond a formal relationship. I thought that was good. Esau wants to be brothers again, and Jacob can't move beyond servant and Lord. Why can't Jacob reciprocate? I was asking myself, what's going on in Jacob's heart in this moment that he can't refer to Esau as brother? And they've hugged it out, they've wept together, but why can't he refer to him as brother? Will his guilt not let him? Sometimes, folks, our guilt and our shame won't let us be what God wants us to be and step into the status that God has for us as his sons and daughters. We are the saints of God. We are his sons and daughters. We are his children. We are princes and princesses, and some of us don't live that way, and so consequently, we don't see ourselves like that. And it's because of how we live that we can't step into the identity, the privilege that God has bestowed upon us. And I wonder if Jacob is struggling with this fraternal connection because of how horribly he treated Esau earlier in their lives. Just wonder. Again, I'll get to heaven and ask Jacob, hey man, how come you couldn't reciprocate the fraternal relationship Esau wanted with you? What was that about? What was holding you back? Jacob's going to run from me when he sees me. I know it. It's okay. I'm going to track him down. Verse 10 and 11, Jacob insists that Esau accept the gift, and he provides a reason why. Look at verse 10 with me. Just verse 10, it says, but Jacob said, no, please, if I have found favor with you, take this gift from me, for indeed I have seen your face, and it's like seeing God's face, since you have accepted me. Jacob says, the favor, the goodwill, the grace, if you've given that to me, then accept, and watch the language here, because Jacob's going to do something interesting in verse 11 that's different than what he does in verse 10. This gift is called manah in the Hebrew. It's a gift, it's a present, it's an offering. Jacob is saying, take this manah from me, and if I found favor with you, if you've given me your grace and your goodwill, which you got to take my gift. It's restitution and reparations from the past. Look at verse 11. Jacob does something different, and this signals something that lets us know what Jacob is thinking in his mind, because he changes his language in verse 11. Again, he insists that Esau take the gift. He says, please take this present that was brought to you, because God has been gracious to me and I have everything I need. So Jacob urged him. He urged Esau until he accepted it. Now, here's what's different. Let's go 3D here. Let's put on our 3D glasses and go into the Hebrew text. In verse 11, when Jacob says, please take my present, that's barakah, not menaha. Now, the difference is barakah in the Hebrew means a gift or a blessing. Remember when we've been talking about a blessing in the Hebrew, it's been barakah. Like the president, Barak, in Hebrew means to bless. Remember, Jacob stole Esau's barakah. And so here, Jacob is using the language of what he stole. Not menaha, but barakah. Don't miss that. That's not trivial. It doesn't show up good. That's why we don't read the Bible just in the English, because you can only watch it in standard definition when you read it in English. When you read it in the original language, now you're watching it in high def or in 3D or 4D. And here the language changes, because Jacob is saying, hey brother, I stole your blessing 20 years ago when I pretended to be you and deceived dad and disenfranchise you. The blessing I stole, here's your blessing back. Don't miss that. That tells us what Jacob is thinking, because the Bible says out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The language tells us everything. And Jacob wants to connect in Esau's mind what he did to him 20 years ago. That is wonderful. Jacob says, for indeed, if I've seen your face, it's like seeing the face of God, since you have accepted me. A person's face, seeing a person's face in the ancient world was tantamount to being accepted or approved by that person. And Jacob is blown away that Esau has shown him his face, that he has accepted and approved of Jacob, because Jacob didn't know if Esau would ever accept him back into his life, and that has happened. I love this statement too by Victor Hamilton. He makes another great observation. He says this: the surprise of Genesis 32 is that Jacob saw God and yet his life was spared. The surprise in Genesis 33 is that Jacob has seen Esau and yet his life is spared. Jacob wrestled with God and didn't die last week. This week, he sees Esau face to face, and his life is spared. Remember, Esau is an expert hunter. He's a skilled marksman. Esau kills things for a living. Jacob knows that. And so the fact that he can have a face-to-face encounter with his brother and be spared, he's blown away. Jacob says, man, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. I didn't deserve to make it through my encounter with God last night, and I can't believe that you haven't killed me on the spot. The other thing that's fascinating here in this language is that Jacob says to Esau that you've accepted me. Accepted me in the Hebrew is ratzah, and it's a cultic term used oftentimes in the context of religious offerings or service. The worshiper or offerer desires that the deity accept, is satisfied, or takes pleasure in what they offer the deity. And so Jacob equates Esau's acceptance and satisfaction and pleasure with him to that of a deity who approves a worshiper or an offerer. And the same way we come in and we sing and we play our instruments and we give our tithes and our offerings, we're offering up a sacrifice to God on Sunday when we come together. And we want God to accept our sacrifice. When they offered animals on the altar in the Bible, they wanted the aroma and the smoke to go up into heaven, and they wanted God to approve of their sacrifice, because when God approves of the sacrifice, He also approves of the sacrificer. The worship, God approves of the worship and the worshiper. God approves of the offering and the offerer. And here, Jacob put so much stock and so much value in Esau's approval that he uses this language that's only used within a cultic or a religious sort of context. Man, he's blown away that Esau has accepted and approved him. This reconciliation means the world to Jacob, and the language is all over this particular passage. What I love about Jacob, and here's another character evolution for us to consider, is that Jacob attributes his financial success and serenity and satisfaction to God's favor, to His grace and His goodwill. Notice Jacob is not taking credit for any of his success, any of his goodwill, any of the things that have happened that have been a blessing. Jacob gives God all the credit. That's proof that Jacob is changing. The other thing that is fascinating here, and again, Victor Hamilton just had some killer insights from the text. He says this about Jacob, and I just love this, and so I had to share it with you. It says, Jacob is as insistent with Esau as he was with the man at Peniel. Jacob's I will not let you go unless you bless me now becomes, in effect, I will not let you go unless you accept my gift. You guys get that? Here again, Jacob is evolving right before our eyes. Jacob is tenacious about giving a blessing just as much as he is about receiving one. That wasn't the case with the old Jacob. Jacob was tenacious. He was vigilant and just persistent about getting his hands on blessings. Jacob was consumed and obsessed with blessings. Jacob never wanted to be a blessing. He just wanted to get them and store them up and hoard them for himself. But here, he's insistent. He tells Esau, man, I'm not going to let you go until you take this blessing. Why? Esau said, hey, brother, I don't need it. The old Jacob would have said, cool, then I'll just keep it. That's the old Jacob. But Jacob says, no, brother, I'm not going to. Look, I wrestle with an angel all night. I'll wrestle with you too. You're going to take this blessing. Guys, the patriarchs were supposed to be a conduit of blessing, not just containers of the blessing. Remember, God says through you, all of the nations of the world are going to be blessed through you. Jacob has been the antithesis to that. Jacob just wanted to get blessings. He didn't want to be one. He wanted to be a container, not a conduit. But God's call on the life of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob is to be a blessing. And here, Jacob is showing us, hey guys, I've changed. I want to be just as tenacious about being a blessing as I am about receiving them. There's hope for all of us. If Jacob can change, then all of us can change. But before you think Jacob is totally changed, the rascal comes back. So I don't want to mislead you. Jacob is just like us, folks. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. He's on a journey with God, and it's not a straight line. And there are setbacks and there are lapses, and Jacob is human just like us. So give yourself some grace for our lapses, because the next movement in verses 12 through 20 show us the return of the rascal could potentially ruin the reconciliation. See, the old Jacob comes back. He's not totally transformed. This caterpillar is not yet the butterfly. He's in the cocoon. And so the rascal returns again, and it could undermine this whole beautiful scene. Because isn't this beautiful? But man, when the rascal shows up, it can all go up in smoke. Jacob is invited to rest or reside with Esau at Seir in verses 12 through 15. Watch this. This is fascinating. Then Esau says to Jacob, let's move on and I'll go ahead of you. And Jacob replied, my Lord knows that the children are weak and I have nursing flocks and herds. If they are driven too hard for one day, the whole herd will die. So let my Lord go ahead of his servant, and I will continue on slowly at a pace suited to the livestock and the children until I come to my Lord at Seir, verses 12 through 14. Esau, possibly in the next logical step in the process of reconciliation, invites Jacob and his tribe to either visit or settle with him at Seir in Edom, where Esau resides with his lavish family and entourage. But Jacob politely declines with a proviso. Jacob says to him, and here's a Michelianism. Here, what I think Jacob is saying. He's saying, Esau, go ahead of us. I have to proceed slowly with my young children and my flocks. We have to travel at a slower pace than you and your men. And so Jacob politely declines, says, hey, if we follow you, we're going to hold you back. Your men are moving too fast. I got wife and kids that are young, and we need to move at a slower pace. And so you go on ahead of us, brother, and we're right behind you. Don't miss the fact that in verse 14, it's unmistakable that Jacob's words suggest that he has accepted Esau's invitation. Did I miss something? Jacob says in verse 14, he says, let my Lord go ahead of his servant, and I'll continue slowly at a pace suited to the livestock and the children until I come to my Lord at Seir. I'm coming, right? Some scholars don't think that Jacob actually agreed to go with Esau or to meet Esau at Seir in Edom. I'm trying to figure out what Bible these scholars are reading. Jacob says, I'm coming. What's ambiguous about that? So look at what Esau accepts Jacob's caveat here, and look at what look at how magnanimous Esau is. He's looking like the big man in the story, not Jacob, not the patriarch. Esau's the one that looks great in the story. Verse 15, Esau said, well, let me leave some of my people with you. But Jacob replied, why do that? Please indulge me, my Lord. Esau offers to ensure Jacob's safe travel to Seir by leaving some of his 400 men behind to travel with Jacob's entourage. Again, Jacob politely declines. Esau wants to give him a security force to make sure that his wives and his children and his possessions make it safely to Seir. And Jacob politely declines again. Esau is making gestures to move the reconciliation process forward. And who's hesitant, who's reluctant is Jacob. Esau's all in, but Jacob is all out. Now in verses 16 through 20, Jacob deceives Esau again by resolving to reside in Shechem via Sokoh. Watch this. That day Esau started on his way back to Seir, but Jacob went to Succoth, and he built a house for himself and shelters for his livestock, and that's why the place is called Succoth. Succoth means a booth or a shelter or a small tabernacle. I want you to notice something in the text on this map. They have this meeting here in Peniel at Mahanaim here. Esau, I cut off the map. Seir and Edom is down here somewhere. In order to get there, you've got to go southeast to get to Edom and Seir down here. Notice that Jacob says, hey brother, I'll meet you in Seir. But notice Jacob goes northwest to Succoth, and Esau's going southeast thinking Jacob is going to join him. Northwest is the complete opposite direction of southeast, if I got my directions right. Jacob has lied again. Brother, I'll meet you there. We're going in the other direction. Y'all don't tell him. Now, we just had this beautiful moment, this kumbaya, this come to Jesus moment. And Esau's given Jacob the greatest gift by not killing him. And he deserved to die for what he did to his brother. And what does he do? He deceives him and tricks him once again. And some scholars debate, no, Jacob never really said he was going to, because he's changed now, so we don't understand the text. No, I think this is clear. Jacob has gamed Esau again. I was thinking to myself, here's another Machiavellianism. Why doesn't Jacob just level with Esau and say something like this? Hey, brother, I'm extremely grateful for the favor you've shown me. I'm forever indebted to you for lifting up my face. While I appreciate your kind offer to visit with you in Edom, the God of our fathers has specifically instructed me to return to the land of our ancestors. Perhaps after I settle my people and possessions there, I can reach out to you to determine the appropriate time to visit. Why doesn't Jacob say that? What's hard about that? What's hard about telling the truth? Say, hey, brother, thank you for the offer, but God told me to go back to the land. I need to obey God, get my family situated, and I want to take you up on your generous offer of hospitality, but I got to do what God said first, but I'll hit you up and we'll find a time to connect. What's hard about that? Jacob had been doing so good telling the truth. Now the new Israel backslides into the old Jacob. Isn't that just like us? We make some progress. We're walking with God. We're overcoming our vices and our lusts and our temptations and our evil passions and appetites, and then bam, we have a relapse. Isn't that just like us? 3 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And here the patriarch slips back and relapse in the lion again and deceiving. And it's just so unfortunate. Jacob does obey God by returning to the land of promise in 18 through 20. Look at this important postscript. This is important, and then we'll look at our Coram Deos and get to our fellowship. After Jacob, verse 18, came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely at Shechem in the land of Canaan, camped in front of the city. From Sukkah, Jacob safely arrives and settles at Shechem, where he purchased a field of land. On our map here, Sukkah is northwest, but Shechem is a bit of a ways even further west that Jacob travels. We think that he probably settled in Sukkah for, 5, maybe 10 years. Anytime you spend the time to build a house and shelters for your flocks, that takes a lot of time. And so this isn't Jacob passing through. He probably spent, several years in Sukkah, but he eventually gets to Shechem where he settles in, according to verse 18. Not only does he settle in Shechem, but verse 19 says he purchases a section of the field where he had pitched his tent from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of silver. So Jacob moves to Shechem and he purchases land there, and he pitches his tent on the land that he has purchased. So Jacob is now a landowner in the promised land because Shechem is in the land of Canaan. Now, I want you to notice something before we end on verse 20. I want you to notice that this postscript is super significant for 3 reasons. 2 promises are fulfilled and one patriarch emulates another. I want you to notice that God delivers on his promise at Bethel to bring Jacob back to the promised land. God had promised Jacob that I'm not going to stop until I fulfill all my promises to you. And one of the promises God made to Jacob in Genesis 28:15 is that after this 20 years, I'm going to bring you back to the land of promise. God delivered on that promise. The other thing that's significant that happens here, it's also at Bethel, Jacob fulfills his vow that he made to Yahweh his God, that he would make Yahweh his God if he brought Jacob back to his family in Canaan in Genesis 28:21. And Jacob does that in the next verse. Watch this. Verse 20 says, and Jacob at Shechem on his land where he's pitched his tent, he set up an altar there. And he called it God, the God of Israel. It's El Elohi Yisrael is what Jacob names the altar, and it simply means God, the God that belongs to Israel. This is the first time in Genesis that an altar has been named. Now, here are some ideas for what ancient altars look like. The tiered and solid bronze altars, these are later. We're not sure whether Jacob uses the unworked stones to make an altar, whether he just has a big boulder altar, or whether he erects a rectangle mound or worked stones with a horn. We're not sure what kind of altar Jacob erects, builds up there, but he not only makes an altar, which means he worships God, but he names the altar God, the God who belongs to Israel. This is Israel's God. Is this God El? Elohi is Jacob's God. Or now that his name is Israel, he is Israel's God. What I love about this is that Jacob, and we'll end with this, for you guys who have been trekking with us in Genesis, you remember when his grandfather entered the land of Canaan for the first time. The first place that Abraham stops in Genesis chapter 12, verses 4 through 7, is at Shechem. And what does Avram do when he stops at Shechem? He builds an altar. And he calls upon the name of the Lord. So I can imagine, Abraham was lived 15 years after Esau and Jacob were born. And I can picture Abraham in my theological imagination bouncing his twin grandsons on both of his knees, since he's got one for each knee. And I'm sure that Abraham was recounting his journey from Mesopotamia into the promised land. And I'm sure he told Esau and Jacob, when granddad came into the land, the first place I came to was Shechem. You know what granddad did when he came to Shechem? I set up an altar and I worshiped God, because I couldn't believe that God delivered and brought me to this land that was 500 miles away from where I was from. And God brought me and our large entourage safely. God is good to granddad. Dad worshiped him at Shechem. And so what does Jacob do in the text? He wants to go to Shechem. As he returns to the land after 20 years, Jacob comes to the same place where his granddad worshiped God. And he sets up an altar like his grandfather, and he worships God in Shechem. I bet you that's not an accident. Jacob planned that. He wants to emulate his grandfather. He is the new Abraham. Don't miss the significance of that. Here are some quorum deos. Here are how we can think through some takeaways, some principles from today's text. Here's what I see in the text. It's a great opportunity on Tuesdays for us to circle up virtually and hear your insights, because I think they'd be a blessing to us all. The first one is, time doesn't heal all wounds, but God does. The healing that took place in Esau's heart, that was an act of God. And so, no, time doesn't heal all wounds, but God does. And that is evidence from Genesis 33. Then for Jacob, our greatest fears can become our greatest favors. Jacob's grace, his goodwill, the blessing in his life, what he thought was his greatest fear actually became his greatest favor. His brother and his reconciliation with him was one of the greatest blessings in Jacob's life. And so let's think differently about what our fears are, the things that we're worried about, the things that we're stressed about, the things that we're afraid of. They may be the very thing God wants to use to bring about the greatest blessing in our life. It was that way for Jacob, and I think it could be that way for us. And then lastly, I was taken aback by this principle that backsliding into previous vices happens sometimes without notice. So let us, alongside others we trust, be vigilant so that our digression doesn't nullify our progression. Jacob's was making so much progress. Character, integrity, working hard, no longer deceiving and conniving and manipulating and tricking and using treachery. But here he backslides. Here he relapses. Here he apostatizes back to old behaviors. And guys, it's like that for us as well. There are times when we can digress. But I pray that that doesn't nullify or wipe away or make null and void our progress. The only way that happens is if we have people around us who can call us up and out. People that can put their finger in our chests and say, David, you are the man. So let us surround ourselves with people who will call us out. People who will tell us we're getting it wrong. Don't surround yourself with enablers. Surround yourself with people who love you enough to tell you the truth about yourself. Proverbs says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. And we need to surround ourselves with people who love us enough to wound us. So God, we thank you for this amazing story of reconciliation. God, you are a God who reconciles things that are far from you back to you. And Lord, we're grateful for that principle and for that truth. So God, would you solidify in our hearts how seminal this idea of reconciliation is to who you are and what your mission is in the earth. God, the same way these twin brothers reconciled, you want us to bring global reconciliation to people that are far from you. So God, show us how to do that. We are your ambassadors. We are your emissaries. We are your envoy. We are your mediators of reconciliation. So God, may you get the glory from your people as they commit themselves to being one with the Almighty again. So use this story as a catalyst to set our hearts on fire to see people made one again. For your glory and our good, in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen.